Good evening, everyone. I'm Kimberly Collins, the Educated Natural, founder and CEO of 10 Marketing LLC. Welcome to another segment of the journey of meeting of the minds. Tonight, as you already know, we're continuing our previous discussion from last week, which is entitled Tomorrow My Sunshine Will Come, Freedom from Domestic Violence and Abuse. Tonight, we're actually going to be talking about breaking the cycle of domestic violence and abuse. Whether you realize it or not, a lot of women, especially, and men, find themselves in domestic violence situations knowingly and unknowingly. A lot of cases that I've read, a lot of research over the last couple of weeks, and I've discovered that some people, believe it or not, find themselves in this situation because they fail to see the signs. So tonight we're going to be giving you some advice on how to first identify if you're in a domestic relationship, and to also give you advice and websites and links which you can go to right now and get help to break this particular cycle. But before I go any further into the discussion, let me introduce you to my panelists for tonight. First and foremost is Ms. Jennifer Foxworthy, CEO and founder of Inspirationally Speaking. Let's welcome her tonight. Woo woo. Next to her is Ms. Elena Jimenez, founder and CEO of Execute Your Destiny. We are so glad to have you tonight as well.
Hi, everybody.
So, ladies, let's get right into it, shall we? We have a lot of women that watch us here on YouTube and also on 10 Marketing LLC, Journey of Meeting of the Minds. And over the past week, we've gotten a lot of feedback from women wondering, okay, I'm in this situation, how do I get out of it? Or some women have even said, okay, I've made it out, but I'm still struggling and still looking over my shoulder since I've been abused. I've also gotten a request from a lady that says, it seems like every relationship I go to, I find myself in the same type of domestic violence or emotional abuse type of relationship. How do I stop this cycle? So tonight, we're going to focus on giving you your gateway, your exit route to get out of that situation. But before we do that, let me inform those of you who may be a little bit unfamiliar with the subject of domestic violence, a little bit of understanding as to how this all takes place. From my research, I found that there is a particular cycle of abuse that takes place. For instance, typically it starts out with an incident. Now, this incident can be anything from a word that's said to you, a statement. It could be an emotional thing that takes place. It could be sexual. It could be physical. But it always starts with an incident. From there, it can move on to where tensions start to build between the abuser and the abusee. The abuser may start to get angry at the abusee for no reason. From there, his anger may lead him into just abusing the woman or the man right from the start. From there, tensions become so much to where it leads to stage 3 of the cycle of abuse, which is the makeup cycle. You know, after he's taken out his tensions on his said victim, he then wants to go and buy you gifts. He then wants to go and buy you flowers. Then he wants to go and take you out for a nice time and just pretty much apologize for the abuse he has caused the abusee. Now, this could consist of apologies, promises. He may even try to turn the table on the abusee by saying that it was your fault that the abuse took place. So this is what I like to deem as the makeup period. Anything that he can do to try to make the abuser forget what just previously took place in their lives, this is what he or she will do. From there, you will go through a period of calmness where it seems like you guys are back on Love Boat. It will make you feel as though this is calm, there's nothing to worry about, it was just a one-time incident maybe, and this could be, it could go on and on and on from there. It would just make you feel like, oh, we're so in love, this is really going to work. Well, it will not work. Why? Because this is a cycle. Because as soon, just like a hurricane, they said if you look at the eye of a hurricane, it's the calm part, but there are bands of wind outside of the eye. Well, the same thing happens in the cycle of abuse. Right after the calm, the storm starts back over. Another incident, another ill-said word, physical abuse, sexual abuse, tension, makeup period, calm, and it just continues to go on and on and on. This is the cycle of abuse. And word to the wise, if you find yourself noticing these types of things where your abuser turns from this lovely, lovely, cute, cuddly individual, everything is peaceful and calm, and all of a sudden they snap, you may be at a certain point of this cycle. So make sure that you become aware of what's going on around you. Do not ignore abuse, because a lot of the times, especially a lot of the research that I've been doing and a lot of conversations I've had with other women, there was always a red flag. So do not ignore the red flag, because it is a part of the cycle of abuse. Now, there is also something else that takes place. It is called the wheel of violence. Now, the wheel of violence kind of digs down a little bit deeper than the cycle of abuse. For instance, at the beginning of the abuse, 9 times out of 10, you will notice threats take place. This is when the abuser will intentionally make or carry out threats to the abusee. He will do something to cause harm to his victim. This could be, he could simply say, you know what, I'm going to leave you if you tell somebody that this occurred. You know what, if you leave me, I'm going to commit suicide. He could even take it a step further and threaten her that if you press charges against me for what I've done to you, I will kill someone in your family. This is what the threat part of the violence, the violence wheel is. From there, it could move on to intimidation. If his threats do not work, he may try to intimidate you in other ways, such as his actions, gestures. There are women now that go through abuse where the man can just raise his hand and, she cowers in fear. This is a sign of intimidation. Another part of the wheel is emotional abuse. In Jennifer's book, a lot of women, describe stories where they underwent emotional abuse, where they've been called out of their names. We all know what names, men will typically call women, and this is becomes instead of it being their name, this title is their name, every time this person mentions them. He will make her feel bad about herself. If the abuser is a man, he will try to make you feel bad, by saying you're fat, you're ugly, you're overweight, you're bald, you're short, whatever he can think of to cause you just emotionally to kind of cower down. These are the things that he will say to you. From there, he will even go as far as trying to keep you from your family. And this is what's entitled using isolation. He will keep you to himself as much as possible because he's afraid that you will tell somebody and the secret will be revealed. Now, what you need to understand during this point is to even know if you're being isolated, look around you. When's the last time you hung out with your friends? When's the last time he allowed you to be out of his sight? Yes, he is keeping you isolated from the ones that may help you get out of this situation. From there, it moves on to denying that anything has even happened. He will make light of the abuse, he or she. They will pretend like you're just overreacting, it wasn't that bad. But I guarantee you, if we asked Jennifer Foxworthy today, when that gentleman punched her in her stomach when she thought she was pregnant, I guarantee you she would say, yes, Kim, yeah, it happened and it hurt. Also, he will try to say things like the abuse didn't happen. He will try to shift responsibility to something else or someone else, like I said, even to her or him. They will even try to put the blame of saying, you caused this, you asked for this by your actions. These all fall under the blame game. From there, if he can't get your power and control, he will go then and go as far as using your children. He will tell you, if you report me, I will call social service and have your children removed from the home. Now, any mother, if you are the abusee, the person being abused, if this is you, that's the last thing you want to hear, is someone's going to take your children away. It's bad enough you found yourself in this situation, but to know that someone could come in and deem your home, unsafe for children and your children be removed. So that threat right there kind of causes women to kind of say, okay, I'm just going to deal with it in silence. He will also, use visitations to you as a way to harass you. Sometimes I've heard women say, he showed up at my job, my place of employment. He's called my workplace on the phone, playing games on the phone, telling my boss all kind of negative things about me. These are all intimidation and power and control tactics that sometimes a lot of abusers will use. From there, he would try to go on and try to really dig down deep now into the woman's innermost parts by making her into his personal servant. And what I mean by this is he will treat you just like people treat servants. He will make all the big decisions. Your name won't be on any of the accounts. His name is up there first. You won't know how much money is in the bank account. You won't know where the money is going out of the bank account. You won't have any clue as to what is going on in your home. Why? Because he has privilege over you. You have given him that power. Why? Because he is your abuser. From there, it will go on to the economic factor. He will go and he will ask you for money. No, he will have you asking him for money. And as a woman that's been battered in this way in a domestic violence relationship, when you've been beating and you've been pushed down so low, and to have someone over you like this, now you got to go and beg this person for money. Now you probably feel this big, and so he knows that. He knows he has power over you. And even to bring even more insult to injury, I've had a woman say, I make the money in the house. He stays at home, but when I bring my paycheck, he's over my paycheck. He controls my money that I go out and make. Well, that's what abusers tend to do because they like to have power and control over their victim. Now, I've given you all 8 slides or pieces of the domestic violence wheel. Now, let me recap. Those things are threats, intimidation, emotional abuse, isolation, blaming, using your children against you, being the privileged one in the household, and using economic abuse. These are the things that your abusers may be using over their abusee in order to maintain or gain power and control. Now, ladies, I've given out a lot of information in those few seconds, and I hope I didn't go too fast. But based on what I've said, I know, Jennifer, I know you probably can relate to this first and foremost to something that I've said. Please give me your opinion, or when you were in your situation, which of these did you say was probably the number one thing that you could probably remember and share with the viewers tonight in reference to the cycle of violence or the violence wheel?
I believe, Kim, that it was physical, emotional, mental. However, when my ex-boyfriend was on alcohol, just in a drunken stupor, it created that isolation. So it appeared that it was on purpose. I didn't realize it at the time, but who wants to be around somebody who's sloppy drunk and you have to constantly apologize for their actions, whether they're punching a hole through the wall or they're tripping and falling and knocking down other people. So the isolation began. Other people didn't want to hang around us. Or his comments towards my friends of, she got big old butt or something, or, just something derogatory or sarcastic. That's what created the isolation. So it happened gradually and not so much in your face.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that you can just pick up, you can just pick out of a crowd of things that the abuser is doing, and this is what he's doing. No, you don't realize until more incidences happen and you find yourself alone, and you're already feeling alone in the abuse and afraid to speak up and speak out about it and tell anybody. You feel alone and ashamed and humiliated. So by the abuser's action, when they're on alcohol and drugs, it creates even more of an isolation.
Miss Elena, you have any comments? I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're good.
So I was reflecting back on some experiences from my childhood that, that I could relate to and that resonated with me. And, one of the things that Jennifer mentioned, in regards to the alcohol. And I remember as a child being, living in an environment where I witnessed, domestic abuse and domestic violence, just being able to pinpoint and pick out the patterns of behaviors of the adults and the patterns and of the incidences. And I know for myself, the worst times would be on the weekends when everybody wanted to just chill out and, folks would start to drink. I learned at a very young age to identify. Well, after a while, you realize that just about every weekend, every time there's alcohol involved, there's going to be an incident and stuff is going to start to pop off. But, as you become more aware, you'll learn, early on when it's going to be a good night and when it's going to be a bad night. And
Right.
typically, the more people that are involved and the more alcohol that's involved, the bigger, the possibility of it turning into a completely crazy and chaotic event. And I know for myself as an adult, while I enjoy drinking socially, it's not something that I particularly partake in, and I don't do to extremes. I have a 2-drink maximum. I may, have 2 glasses of wine, but that's usually the max for me because I feel very uncomfortable in an environment where people are drinking excessively, because when people drink, their rationality and their ability to reason and see things clearly goes out the window. And when you've been exposed, yourself, when as adults, especially when we have old wounds and old feelings that remain that we haven't dealt with, typically as adults, you either, and I've mentioned this before, you either work it out or you act it out. And if you haven't worked through your issues, then 9 times out of 10, you're going to act them out in some fashion. And when adults are drinking, your ability to reason goes out the window, and that's when situations can become very alarming. And so I know, as I mentioned, for myself, when I'm around people and if I see that they're drinking excessively, or that a lot of people are drinking excessively, I don't particularly like to put myself in those situations, and I tend to remove myself. It's not something that I feel comfortable with, because I know how things can go. I saw it all the time growing up, and it just leaves you feeling very guarded and feeling anxious, so.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad, Jennifer, you brought up alcohol, because that was the first time I witnessed domestic violence. It was a party at my mom's apartment, and alcohol was being poured and consumed all that particular day. And by the evening hours, everybody was inebriated. And what happened was a couple had an argument. And after the argument, well, as the argument was going on, my mom sent me to my room because me and my friends were kind of walking in and out the house, and the street lights were on, so by that time I was in the house. And we get inside. I get inside and I close my door because I notice all these people are in the house. I can hear this getting louder and louder. The music's going. And the next thing I know, I hear screaming and glass breaking. And of course, I'm running out to make sure my mom's okay. And next thing I know, I see this man bleeding. His blood all over the room. He's bleeding. And I'm like, what in the world? And the lady still has the alcohol, the bottle broken in her hand. And I'm like, what in the world? And I'm standing there, and now she goes to plunge at him, and everybody's trying to hold them apart. This man is bleeding over. The first time I saw from my own eyes I guess you could say, the opposite viewpoint of domestic violence, because typically you'll see the woman being the victim or the abusee, and the man the abuser. But in this case, it was flipped. The woman was the abuser, and the man was the abusee, and it just floored me. And I from there, I've seen several other incidences where women were the abusee, and it wasn't pretty. And I used to sit there and think, if y'all would stop drinking, and all alcohol was always the thing. You know, it seemed like when people drink, they become brave, and you know, they think they're invincible, and so they started acting out. And every incident that I've witnessed, alcohol was that common denominator. So Jennifer, I tell you, you're right. You know, if somebody is an abuser already,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like alcohol just activates that, and especially if the female is not a drinker. Because there was the other incident that I witnessed. The woman was a woman in church. She was a Christian, and her husband was a lush. And we didn't know at the time. Well, I didn't, because I was still a kid. I'm not sure if my mom and all the crew knew, but I never saw her be abused until this particular day. I was at her home. And me and her son, who's younger than me, we were in his room playing, and I heard her scream, and we run out, and he is just beating her, and she's screaming at us to leave the house. Not call for help, get out. So as a kid, I'm like, okay. And I grab her son, and I run to my mom's apartment and told my mom what's going on. And then my mom, of course, reacted as an adult. And she takes off to the house to help her family member. And so alcohol, still another incident where alcohol was the case. They were all drinkers, and it just constantly happened. And, it makes me think, are people like that who find themselves constantly in domestic violence situations and relationships, one relationship after the other? You're constantly being abused, whether physically, emotionally, what have you. Are you conditioned in that way? Does that mess up your psyche, being an abusee, to think that this is all that you are put on this earth to, to undergo? And so after doing some research, I kind of discovered that it seems like there are two different types of individuals that find themselves in domestic violence situations. One is the ones that voluntarily go into this. One of the characters in Jennifer's book, she was this person who voluntarily walked into a domestic violence relationship. She knew this gentleman. She's seen his previous girlfriends be abused by him and seen how he treated them, yet and still he looked like a great candidate for her. So instead of walking far away from this individual, she walked to him and suffered the same type of domestic violence that his previous girlfriends that she had witnessed go through. So the other person, on the other hand, is someone that says, you know what, I love this person, we were doing well, and then out of nowhere, boom, the abuse. That's the other individual, the individual that's surprised by being struck, being called outside of their name. These are the ones that says, I didn't see this coming. This is, wow, there was no red flag, there was nothing, everything was, skipping through daisies, everything was lovey-dovey, and all of a sudden this individual is attacking me. So those are the ones I entitled the surprised ones. So, Elena, I'm going to pass this over to you. When you think of these two types of individuals, what comes to mind?
Well, definitely what comes to mind, first of all, is that any one of us could find ourselves in a situation like that, especially, as you mentioned, those that, are kind of caught off guard and caught by surprise, because, on the surface, when you're getting to know someone, they put their best foot forward, and typically you have to be deep into the relationship before you start to see some of the red flags. And so that could happen to any one of us. But once you're in there, it's definitely important to recognize what's going on and to figure out how to get yourself out of that situation. For the other types, I think that, we all know that we are a product of our environment, typically. And as children, it is so important that we guard them and we protect them from certain situations and circumstances. And when you have people who are in violent or abusive situations and they have children who are witnessing, the different incidences that happen in the household, then of course, then the child, they're learning all about life, love, and relationships from what's being demonstrated in the household. And so if you're exposing your children to these types of situations and circumstances, then they're going to be conditioned to believe that this is what love is, this is what life is all about, and that's just the way that it is. And more than likely, as you start to grow older and find yourself in relationships yourself, then you steer towards the familiar. And what you know about love is can be drama, and can be the highs and lows, and it might be intense one minute, and things might be out of control, but oh, how good it feels to make up, and when they're showering you with gifts and love and all this kind of stuff. And so that might be all they know, and so that's what they look for. Jennifer, would you say that sounds familiar? I know from reading your book that you were definitely one of those that just found yourself in that situation and caught off guard and by surprise. Like, you walked in there and you're like, hold up, what is going on in here?
Yeah, you're definitely right, Elena. I had relationships. Like I said, low self-esteem led me to be susceptible into poor relationships. I didn't go into the relationship thinking, oh, this is a bad boy, but there's something about him that I just have to have or be around. I thought they were cute. Maybe they made me laugh. There was just something about them, and I tried to forge that relationship. But unfortunately, it was a lot of giving on my behalf and taking on theirs. And as far as my ex-boyfriend, yeah, everything started out sweet and nice, and I was feeling a love that I longed for, an intimacy that I had longed for. And then all of a sudden, when I thought I was pregnant, which is something that he did not agree with or want, he hauled off and punched me in the stomach. So that was the catalyst right there, but there probably were signs in the beginning as well, with his attitude and drinking. But the more we were together, the more things grew and escalated. So I was definitely one of the ones that I was smart, educated, eyes wide open, I know better, and found myself in this situation.
Amazing. I tell you, it always makes me think, how does this happen? If you see a red flag, why would you voluntarily walk into it? It's like seeing a building on fire and say, you know what, I'm going to go in here and sit down. And that's what I keep thinking of. It's just walking into a inferno with no protective gear. You're just walking into it. You see it's burning. You see what's going on. You know it's going to hurt. You know it's not going to end well. But yet you still walk into it. And I think a lot of women that find themselves in this situation who voluntarily walk into it are the ones who probably think, I'm the one to change him, or I'm the one to change her. So I am going to go into this thing eyes wide open. I know what I'm going to get into, but yet I'm still going to try to save this person. Mm-hmm. And my best advice would be, the quicker and the sooner you realize that you cannot change people, the better for you. Yeah. You can only control yourself and your own actions. You don't know what that man or woman may be thinking on any given day. I don't care how long you've been together. I don't care how long you've known them. They may just have a breaking point. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, a lot of people that are abusers, they abuse those that's closest to them, the ones they value as weak. Now, let them be equally matched. Let that woman be equally matched to that man that wants to abuse her, because trust me, as soon as he hits her, she's going to hit him back. And it's going to be tit for tat. And eventually, he's going to bow down because he's going to realize I met my match. Hardly ever have I read a story or a report where the woman or the man, the abuser and the abusee, were on equal terms. No, one of them was, classified as the weakest. And so what happens when you are in a relationship like that with someone you deemed as the weakest one, you're going to try to get your power and control over them. And that's what happens in abusive relationships. And for women that find themselves on the other end who are taken by surprise, you know, a lot of them just seem to cower down to it. And that was always the biggest question for me. Like, if you know that there is better out there for you, why would you cower down to this? And based on my research, it seems like a lot of women do this. I don't know if it's fear. I think for what I've read, a lot of people are just scared. A lot of people are embarrassed because what I learned is maybe 30 or so years ago, domestic violence was one of those things that was on the hush hush. It was kept inside the home. It wasn't openly discussed because a lot of women were embarrassed by it. Nobody wants to know, want everybody else to know that they're being abused at home. You want to go outside your door smiling and laughing and enjoying life. You don't want to let somebody know that you're being beaten like that. So a lot of people kind of just, 30 years ago, they kept it quiet. Well, now, if you check the recent news reports, I know military-wise, it's really now being talked about in the military. Before, it was probably something you hardly heard of in the military because, the military has such a prestige with it. But now you're noticing all these news stories that women are saying, no, I was sexually assaulted, I was abused, I was this, I was that. And now a lot of eyebrows are raising like, wait, our military people are going through this as well? So, I am so glad that we are using this platform to really dig in and talk about this particular topic. Elena, I know you had something to say.
I did. I wanted to just say that, I know a number of women that have been involved in domestic abuse or domestic violence situations in their relationships. And I care to differ that the women, these particular women were necessarily weak or coward in the situation. I think that with their situations, they were, because they grew up in an environment where this was the norm and they were sort of conditioned for it, they had a very high tolerance for, certain things that those of us who maybe, are accustomed to being treated better, they have a higher tolerance to deal with some of those things than we would. I mean, you don't need to hit me upside the head for me to get the message, but I don't think that they were very strong women. They were very opinionated women, and I would say that they definitely went toe to toe with these guys. But I think one of the things is that because they had been conditioned, because of their upbringing and what they had been exposed to, and because this the norm, they didn't know any different. They didn't have a different idea of what love can be, of what love should be, of what an appropriate, true loving relationship looks like. One, and two, they're not equipped with the tools, and the know-how to, work to get themselves out of those situations. And so they wind up, stuck in a situation and exposing their children to these situations. So I just wanted to, to mention that, because I know, some of the strongest women that I know, very opinionated, I mean, will go toe to toe, but they're steady still there. And I think it's because within themselves, and their way of working through and trying to heal their own childhood drama and trying to change the situation with children. They were victims.
Uh-oh. You know Selena?
Yeah, looks like it.
Okay, hopefully she'll come back in here shortly. But
But
it's like, go ahead.
But I do understand what Elena was saying, and she brought up a great point as far as, like myself, in the military, defending my country, working in a male-dominated industry. It's like you know better, you know right from wrong, but sometimes you're shocked by the initial situation or circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it becomes a pattern, then it's like the light bulb comes on of, hey, this isn't right. or you're hoping that the person was joking, or you take them at their sorry. And so, okay, I forgive you. But there's only so much of that that you can, so can dish out and accept as they're truly apologetic. So.
I agree, Jennifer. I agree wholeheartedly because, even after, witnessing the lady whose husband was beating her, um, she, kind of told me, now that I'm an adult,
Mm-hmm.
and, I kind of told her the memory that I had. And I questioned her, why did you end up marrying him? Y'all stayed married for the longest. Why didn't you just walk away? Why did you still stay there? And her thing was, it was my decision. It was my life. And, when I was little, which was over 30 years ago, when, like I said, people really didn't talk about it too much. She said, her family knew, but she in turn loved him to the point where she just pretty much settled. She didn't want to start over with no one else. She wanted to be with him, and being with him, meant enduring abuse, and that's what she accepted. So I found that heartbreaking, one. And, it made me think how many other women out there are feeling the exact same way. They're saying, yes, he beats me or she beats me, but I don't want to move forward and start over with anyone else.
Right.
And, if you are a woman out there and you're viewing this, and you know someone out there that may be in that particular type of situation, we're going to move on now to a segment where we discuss what it is you can do to help, that individual. Now, about 2 years ago, I had someone really close to me find themselves in a domestic violence situation. And being the person on the other end of that phone, day after day, week after week, hour after hour, of witnessing the abuse, hearing the words that were being said to her, and hearing her cry on the other end of that line time and time again, it made me feel like I was helpless because we lived in two different states, and there was nothing that I could do, physically. I couldn't go there and save her. So I thought that maybe I would be able to go and, over the phone, just, give her some advice. And I guess my advice must have been something that she didn't want to hear. Because once I voiced the advice and gave my opinion and gave her resources to go and things to do and, people that may help her find a place to stay, I became the bad guy.
Mm.
And I learned a very, very valuable lesson at that point. And that lesson was, Kim, no matter what, do not get yourself involved in somebody else's relationship, because there are people who feel better about themselves for some strange reason to tell you what's going on, but they don't want you to help them get out of it. They just want you to listen to it. And so I found myself in this position of being stuck in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Do I help, or do I just be quiet and just continue to be that ear while she's over there being abused, while her kids are seeing this abuse? What do I do? So my question, ladies, tonight for you to answer would be, what do you say, or what do you do to help someone out there that hands down, is being abused or find themselves in a domestic violence relationship? What, as a person on the outside, what if anything, can you do or say to help this person break this cycle? Elena, do you have any advice? Is she still frozen?
Having technical difficulties. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear us? Uh-oh. Seems like Elena is stuck. Okay, Jennifer, I guess that leaves you.
Okay.
I would say,
Oh, we lost her again.
Okay.
Sorry, everyone.
it's so hard for a non-abused person or someone who's never experienced to try and give advice to someone who is living it day in and day out. The first and foremost, I would say have some type of empathy or compassion and pray for them.
Right.
So I'll go on my spiritual side with that and just lift that person up to God to where that He blesses them with the wisdom, the clarity, and the common sense to know when enough is enough. And just like you said, to listen to them and maybe hand them a brochure that maybe you've gotten from a website or an agency and say, hey sis, because maybe they don't recognize it. Maybe it's subtle. Maybe it's in the beginning stages. Maybe it's not very blatant. And so, hey, you might, I'm not saying you're in this relationship, but here are some statistics, some facts, some terms. If you can say yes to 8 out of the 10 questions, then more than likely you might find maybe you're in an abusive relationship. So I would come at them from that angle. As far as you rattle off several questions, and if they can be honest with themselves and answer majority of them yes, their light bulb should hopefully turn on. Also let them know, hey, you can get restraining orders. There's agencies out there to help. And I know at the end we'll go over resources. But I know God answered prayers. He answered mine. And when I finally just submitted and said, God, I'm stuck. I know I need to get out. A new year is a new beginning. But I have some obstacles in my way. And He came to me so clearly. And I just went in that direction. And I didn't turn back. So just compassion and empathy. But don't turn a blind eye. If you actually see the person smack them down, blood is splattered against the wall, kids are frightened, cowered in the corner, call 911. Don't turn a blind eye to it and say, oh, it's not my problem. I don't want to get in the middle of it. Oh my gosh, no. Because if something happens to that person, they die, they end up in the hospital, now it's on your conscience. And, there could be some laws out there of you witnessed it or you knew it and you didn't call for help. So you have to be very careful and just be with that person.
I agree. Great advice. Great advice. Welcome back, Miss Elena.
I'm having technical difficulties tonight. But I think I heard most of, or I know what the question was. And, as Jennifer stated, definitely encourage them to pray for them. Encourage them to go to counseling, seek help. Call it as you see it. Let them know what you think, what you see. I would say limit your dialogue and interaction with them. If someone's saying, oh, and he did this, oh my God, girl, did he, da, 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 da. Try to listen, because ask key questions and let them talk. With every incident, and the reason why I say that is there is nothing more powerful than becoming fully conscious and fully aware of yourself. And when you're talking with someone and they're just a sounding board, what happens is you're just hearing yourself. And with every time you pick up the phone, and you call someone and they're just kind of quiet, they're keeping what they're saying to a minimum, you just hear yourself. Before you know it, you're going to sound like a broken record to yourself, and you're going to realize that you are stuck in a pattern. And so for that, I would say try not to get caught up in the drama, because to some degree, and I'm not to trivialize it by no means. As Jennifer stated, if somebody's being beat down to the point where there's, blood on the walls and just crazy stuff is going on, I mean, by all means, we're all responsible adults. We should take some responsibility to pick up the phone and call 911 and say, hey, this is going down right in front of me. I just witnessed this. Somebody needs to come out here and do something about it. But if you're on the side of, you're just a sounding board to a relative who's calling, and they're basically, all they're doing is venting or complaining about the situation, and they're not doing anything about it, or it doesn't appear that they're trying to do anything about it, then, just listen. Pray for them and be consistent in your messaging every time, because I know we've talked, and all three of us have been there, where we know someone who's in a situation that's less than ideal. Right. Perhaps they're not being beaten, but they're being, there's definitely dysfunction and abuse going on some level, and the latest incident, now they're caught up in their emotions of it at the moment. They're heated and they're calling and they want to vent. And we've probably all been there, where we're like, what, he did that to him, what, oh my God, well, and then there's this back and forth, and it just fuels the drama. And if you see that someone is really in a situation and you want to help them by encourage them to pray, seek counseling to make their situation better, and encourage them that they deserve better, and that they're strong enough to take the steps necessary to put themselves in a better situation. Ask questions, not necessarily about their situation, but ask them, what is love? Mm-hmm. Maybe that's the only thing you do during the conversation. What is love? Well, what does that mean to you? What does that look like to you? And let them talk. But there's nothing more powerful, again, than recognizing, and being aware of your own behavior and what's going on with you. And when you pull back from that situation and just kind of sit back and let them reel in it by themselves, they will start to hear themselves saying the same things over and over and over again. And then they can see that there's a pattern, that they're caught up in their own pattern of behavior and in the consequences of their own choices, because unfortunately there are people who are addicted to the drama of a dysfunctional relationship and don't recognize that they are. Again, as I mentioned earlier, they like those highs and those lows, and they like the makeup after the fall. They don't know how to, stick to the middle of the road unless it's very up or very down. They don't really know how to function, and typically that's from a preconditioning or being, exposed to that sort of drama early on in their lives, or feeling a sense of, as Jennifer mentioned, low self-esteem or low confidence, and wanting desperately to have a relationship with someone that they'll settle for anything just to to have someone at their side. But making sure that we're not getting ourselves caught up in it and giving them, I'm big on love, on identifying and on defining what it is and identifying what it is, identifying how you give it and how you receive it from someone else. And if the situation you find yourself in is deviating from that, then you're off. You're off course, and you really need to, make some changes. And the only one that can make the changes necessary for your life is always you.
I agree. I totally agree, because that's one thing I did notice, once I kind of backed myself away from the situation, I realized that this person was in a cycle. This is, like you said, they were addicted to the drama. They were addicted to relationships that caused their hair to stand up on their head, And once I realized that, I said, okay, now I know what I'm dealing with. I'm not dealing with someone that's involuntarily walked into this situation. This person knows what they're getting into, and they like it. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing I could do, nothing I could say that was going to change it. This is something they're attracted to. And when I think about it now, at that particular time, my main concern was her safety and the safety of her children. And that brings me to my next point. People, especially mothers, you need to realize how this type of domestic violence and abuse is impacting your children. Because we all know, and we're all mothers here, we all know that our children grow up and learn behaviors based on what they see. And we can, tell them all the time, do as I say, not as I do. But let's face it, when it comes to domestic violence and things of that nature, you never know. You may be, when that child sees their mother, especially a young girl, when she sees her mother being abused in such a way, you're teaching her that this is how a man is supposed to treat a woman. So they will grow up 9 times out of 10 looking for someone to treat them in that manner. And if a nice guy comes along that treats them like the queen, they'll do anything within their power to kind of make them go away, to find that thug, to find that quote unquote that turned back in the day, that roughneck. They'll go out and search for that person, because that's what they used to, that's what they're attracted to, that's what they were born and seeing. So when it comes to children, being that we're all mothers, we have to be mindful of what we allow our children to be exposed to. We also, have to understand ourselves that this does impact the kid. The kid may not see you get smacked. The kid may not see you being physically harmed, but they will see the after effects. Just because you send a child to their room doesn't mean they can't hear what's going on in the other room. So you need to realize that. A lot of people say, oh, well, my kids never witnessed me and my husband arguing. I always send them, into their room. They can still hear. It's a house. You can hear. So be mindful of that. Jennifer and Elena, either one of you have some advice, for parents or women out there that find themselves in this situation about the childhood perspective. How does this impact children?
You could go ahead, Elena.
Yeah, I was going to say, first of all, do some research on it, because these situations impact children on so many different levels. It impacts their development, it impacts their education, it impacts their behavior, it impacts their health, it impacts their ability to learn, it impacts their emotional development. It affects them on all levels. When you are caught up in a domestic violence or abusive situation, you're so caught up in the drama, and you are so detached from the reality of the situation that your children wind up being neglected, because as you're hurting and you're all caught up in your head about what's happening and trying to make ability to be present with your child at that time and to give them the nurturing, the attention that they need. Children that are in these types of situations typically grow up being insecure. They have anxiety issues. They're typically fearful and guarded of other people. They're always, when is stuff going to pop to just, they can't really thrive, especially at school. And when they see things or hear behaviors at home that are inappropriate, they're going to go to school. And again, you either work it, act it out, they're going to go to school and they're going to it out. They're going to speak in, using the same language that mommy and daddy are using at home. They're going to have the same type of attitudes towards, other people, children, teachers, as they see their parents having at home. They're going to hit if that's what they see going on at home. So it impacts them on so many different levels. And when your child is at school demonstrating these behaviors, oftentimes they're going to be tagged as the bad kids. The teachers are going to have a whole lot less tolerance with them, as they see that the kid is constantly acting out. On one day they might come in and they do one thing or say one thing, and the teacher's like, to the office, to the, because their tolerance level, because the child has been, labeled bad or whatever, and so everybody's tolerance level of them is very, very low, and it impacts their ability to learn in school. Not to mention, they'll lack confidence. They'll lack, they don't have the tools necessary to really work through certain issues. They don't have the emotional capacity to be able to do those things. And worse yet, their belief system is being established based on what they are witnessing at home. Again, so if we see, that mommy and daddy, are beating each other upside the head, and then next thing you know, there's flowers and, date night and lovey-doveyness and all this kind of stuff, then that's their belief system. That's what love is. That's what relationships are. That's how it, that's how it is. And, when your children are left to figure these things out on their own, to make their own judgments on what's going on, because you're not sitting down and having these conversations with them, and because you're not emotionally available to them, they're left with a hole that they will later in life fill. They will seek to fill. And when you talk about these relationships, where whether it be a female or a male, and they wind up in these dysfunctional relationships with all this drama all the time, it's oftentimes because their inner child is seeking to heal. The grown adult in this relationship now is seeking to heal the heart of that inner child that's within them, that has that huge hole still left in them, that didn't feel special, that didn't feel smart, that didn't feel, that they could accomplish and succeed and do great things in life, because they didn't have the encouragement and the support of their parents. Instead, they saw all this drama and come from a place of lack, especially emotionally, and that intimate type of relationship that typically, as parents, we're here to provide to our children. Again, it affects their health. When children are exposed to these types of things, they develop a lot of anxiety. Some children, I know, will, at the first sign of some type of drama, especially young girls, I've seen this happen. They'll grow up, they get sick to their stomachs, they suffer from headaches, they'll sleep a lot because they'll suffer from depression, because there's a huge hole in them. They are, especially the younger the children are, the typically the greater the impact is on them, because they're seeing all of this stuff and they don't understand any of it. And if the parent, or adult, or a counselor or someone isn't explaining to them what's going on, then typically, as children, they don't know the world. All they know is them, and they will think it's their fault. They will think they've done something wrong, or even worse, they will try to fix the situation themselves. They will try to talk to mommy or talk to daddy. Don't be mad at daddy anymore. He didn't mean it. He's sorry. And they find themselves in, sometimes in situations where they're playing the adult and they're trying to oftentimes those little fixers grow up to be big fixers who want to just go and find somebody who's, has a lot of anger management issues, and they just want to hold them and fix them. So when you say, well, how do these women wind up in these relationships? There's a direct correlation and a direct relationship with typically what most of these people have seen in their childhood, and whether or not they, how they were made to feel by their parents and their adult situation, their adult
That's
life.
true. Wow, Elena, that's some great nuggets there. You are absolutely right. Children are directly impacted by everything the abuser does, everything the abusee undergoes. They see it. They live in the same house, and it just goes back into the cycle. Now it goes from just being you and the woman. Now it's heading over to the children as well. So it definitely is, a part of the cycle.
And just another comment really quick, as you mentioned, from the abuser's perspective and what they're doing, they're watching everything. They're watching what abusers do, and they're watching how the abused responds. If they stay, how they passive aggressive? Are they spiteful? you know, how is it that this person is responding? Because when they're watching both, then that's how they're like, oh, well, when this happens, you do this, and when that happens, you do that, and so that's the paradigm they wind up operating from. So
Right.
it's so important for parents to recognize it's not just what the abusers are doing. So whether you're a mother or a father in a relationship where someone else is the abuser and you think, well, at least they're not seeing that from me, if they see you stay, then they learn to identify with, okay, well, it's okay to stay, and I'm not good enough to deserve better. And so you really have to be mindful about what messages you are sending your children indirectly, not even, you know, and if you're in a mindset of always trying to keep the peace, then that's what your child is going to think is what they're supposed to do. So at the end of the day, you really, as parents, we need to consider and think, well, what exactly is it I want to teach my child? What is it that I want them to learn? And if what's going on here is not what I want them to learn, then I need to remove myself from this situation, and so that I can remove them from this situation.
That is great advice, because that leads us to our next point: is what do women do, you know, who find themselves in this particular situation? And my advice, if you are being abused, you know, the abuse is taking place, the very first thing you should do is call 911. You know, because you and your children now are in danger. This person has taken it to a whole nother level. You are in danger now. If you feel you can't get the help at 911, I would suggest you go and try to find family members to help you. You know, get support from them. If you are injured, you know, I've recently seen a news report why this lady was beaten, and she took a Facebook profile picture and, you know, put a picture and placed it on Facebook, and we all get to see what happened to her face, and this lady has to have all kind of reconstructive surgeries on her face, you know. So in that case, she needed medical help. And that's what I'm telling you. If you are the person, like the lady in Jennifer's book, if you are being abused, you got physical abuse happening to you. I mean, your eye is black, your face is cut. Get medical help. Call 911. Find a safe place for you and your children. And to move on from there, our closing thoughts, we're going to talk about, once again, the resources. Jennifer, the resources that ladies can go to right now, contact, websites, what have you, so that they can get aid right now. So I'm going to turn it over to you so you can give the list of the resources that you have on hand there, and Maryland especially.
Then what I want everyone to know is that just about every state has their own agency dealing with domestic violence. Maryland's happens to be called Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence. But overall, there is a national hotline, so to speak. They have their own website, and from there you can find out all type of legal information. You could click find out resources in your own particular state. So, National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. That is our country's national organization dealing with domestic violence. National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Their website is www.ncadv.org. And that's N as in Nancy, C as in cat, A as in apple, D as in dog, V as in victory.org. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-SAFE. That is again 1-800-799-7233. It's available 24 hours a day. And then they even have for the hearing impaired, which is 1-800-787-3224. For Maryland specifically is 1-800-MD-HELPS. 1-800-634-3577. I give you Maryland because that's the state that I'm located in. What I also want people to know for resources, these agencies, they're there to help you get legal assistance, transportation assistance, safe temporary housing assistance. Maybe you need child care while you go to your legal court hearings. I want also people to know that they encourage you when you're going to these websites, use a public computer. Do not use your own personal home computer because your abuser, they will, sometimes the abuser will give off signs that we're stashing money away for our escape or hiding clothes in the trunk or something like that, that we're about to make our getaway. So they're going to become distrustful. So, and some of them may be savvy at checking the computer. So these hotlines, they encourage you to use a public computer. There are also brochures that are tiny enough that where you can hide into your shoe. Because guess what? Your abuser is going to be checking your purse. So unfortunately, you have to watch your back, but in order to survive and come out safe, you have to. You have to think a step ahead of your abuser. If they are already distrustful, isolating you from your friends and family, they're going to be checking, did you leave out with those same clothes that you went to work in? Do you smell like another man's cologne? Do you smell like sweat? They're going to really be on, really be on you. Also, there are agencies that can help the abusers change. On Maryland's website, for instance, is to help abusers gain awareness of their behavior and help them. Uh, it's called Abuser Intervention Programs. So most states may have those. So it's not just about helping the abusee, but we're also they're wanting to help the abuser get their life back on track, to know that the coping skills of hitting on someone, sexually abusing them, just domestic violence period, is not the way to be. Also, you got a special population, and I'll close with this, Kim. Military. Those in the military, we are already experiencing professional struggles. And if you're in a male-dominated work field, how do you open up to say, I need help or I'm being abused? You know that the agencies are out there. But to just bring yourself, because now it's admitting that I'm vulnerable, that I've gotten myself into this situation, and now I need the military to help me out in some manner. You also have those in the LGB, the lesbian, gay, transgender community. They're already having a hard time coming out, expressing that this is who they are, and then to even express that, hey, I'm in a domestic violence relationship. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Also, those with disabilities, the hearing impaired. But these agencies in the different states, they are equipped to handle all these situations. So that's what I want to leave with as far as resources, as far as the website, as far as the hotline, as far as the name. Go to a public computer. Watch your steps, cover them carefully, and but do not suffer in silence.
Mm-hmm.
Do not feel alone, ashamed, and humiliated. 1 in 4 women, 1 in 10 men. So you are not alone. And there are, just like alcoholics and drug anonymous clubs, there are support clubs for the abusee. So thank you, Kim, for giving me that opportunity to express that.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Elena, for joining me in this discussion. I know, deep down in my heart that if somebody's watching this, I've just got confirmation from several people giving us messages under the video saying, great job, ladies. Thank you. You're right on point with what you're saying. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank both of you tonight. Jennifer, I am so glad that you were able to escape and break the barriers of that domestic violence relationship. I'm so glad that you are here with us to stand tall and tell other ladies that, yes, there is sunshine after that storm. So if you haven't already, make sure you pick up this wonderful, wonderful work of art here. Tomorrow, My Sunshine Will Come, Memoirs of Women Who Survived Domestic Violence by Jennifer Foxworthy herself. Get your hand on this book. These women are some survivors. They are trailblazers, and we are doing everything we can to let their story be heard, seen, read, and talked about. So do whatever you can. Get this book, read it, do reviews on it, because it is there to help other women break this cycle. As always, I hope you guys reach out to us if you have any questions. Make sure you leave that, down below this video. Leave us in the comment box, email us, what have you. You can always contact us at www.facebook.com/Kimberly Collins, The Educated Natural. That is my Facebook fan page. Like the page, leave a comment so that you can be updated as to what's coming on the next segment. I will see you guys in the next video. And until then, enjoy your journey. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.